I've entitled this week's sermon, Jesus Makes All Things New. Our text is Acts 9, verses 32 through 43. So let's think about our own community this week and ask ourselves this question. How is the gospel spreading in our area? What is our strategy for reaching the lost with the good news? Through ministries in our own church or also partnering with other ministries outside in our community. One of the things we're trying to do is to take advantage of the internet and making these videos to try to increase our footprint in the area. But really what we need to be about is one-on-one gospel ministry. And so when we get back together especially, we need to take the gospel to all spheres of influence where God has placed us. Because Jesus makes all things new. And his kingdom is advancing here in Merritt Island and all over the world. Well, this week's text opens with a record of Peter, who's going out into the nation and the countryside of Israel. He's visiting villages where the gospel's been taken out from Jerusalem, and he's ministering to these little congregations that are scattered throughout the land. So Luke records two miracles for us here: the healing of a paralytic named Aeneas, who lives in Lydda, and the raising of a dead woman named Tabitha, who is in Joppa. Well, having already witnessed God's working miracles through Peter, we might wonder, why are these two miracles included here? Well, first of all, they authenticate Peter's apostleship. They remind us of who Peter is and that he is running in the footsteps of Jesus. Secondly, they demonstrate the power of Jesus. Peter's mission to the nations and ours is propelled by the resurrection power of Jesus. And thirdly, these miracles provide signs of the coming kingdom of Jesus, who will heal the sick and raise the dead. But these miracles are not ends in themselves, because in both cases, people turn to the Lord for salvation as a result of them. So the first miracle involving Aeneas highlights Christ's power over disease. You know, I can't imagine what's in this guy's heart as he's lying there, paralyzed on a bed. Here's a man who is helpless, perhaps even unable to feed himself. He could not experience the satisfaction of a hard day's work or feel the Mediterranean Sea lapping against his ankles on a hot summer day. Whatever dreams he cherished, he was about to see them come true. When Peter sees Aeneas, he simply says, "Aeneas, Christ heals you. Get up and make your bed." When doing this, Peter points to the power of Jesus, who had a history of healing paralytics. And Aeneas got up and he walked in response to Peter's words. And assuming that the story follows a similar pattern of Acts chapter 3, the miracles attract a crowd. And Peter preached the gospel to them. Many people were converted. Next, we see Christ's power over death displayed in the story of Tabitha, a saint who became sick and died. And Luke tells us what made her so special. It says that she was always doing good works and acts of charity. And the widows for whom she had made clothes, they mourned for her deeply. And the disciples in Joppa, they sent for Peter, hoping that he might raise her. They didn't even bury her. They placed her in an upper room, and they were hoping for a miracle. And they were not going to be disappointed. God used Peter to display Christ's power over death. And so Peter stands in the tradition of Elijah and Elisha, and especially Jesus. I mean, like Jesus and Elisha, Peter sent everyone out of the room, and he's left there with a corpse. Like Elisha, Peter falls to his knees, and he prays, and he looks to the one who has resurrection power. And after Peter prays, he calls Tabitha by name, and he tells her, "Get up." And in response, she opens her eyes, just like the Shunammite woman's son did in 2 Kings chapter 4, verse 35, as he had awakened. So Tabitha sits up, as the widow's son at Nain did in Luke 7, verse 15. And then as Elijah and Jesus gave their sons back to their widowed mothers, so Peter gives this widow back to the saints. Now, both of these miracles set the stage for the next one. Having shown us Christ's power over disease and death, Luke has prepared us to see Christ's power over discrimination. So Luke concludes the chapter by noting that Peter's in Joppa, and he's staying with Simon, who is a tanner. A tanner treats the skins of dead animals. And a tanner, it was a person who was perpetually ceremonially unclean, according to the Old Testament. And there was an unfair but an understandable social prejudice against tanners. So by moving in with Simon the tanner, Peter demonstrates that the fact that the Old Covenant laws of uncleanliness had been abrogated by the New Covenant. Jesus makes all things new. And while these events were unique in the New Testament, as Jesus was laying the apostolic foundation for his church, our takeaways are these. Number one, Jesus overcomes disease and death. So rely on him. Do you need strength in the midst of sickness and grief and pain? Look to him. Do you need power to testify boldly about his grace? Rely on him. He's the one who raises the dead. And secondly, Jesus shows hospitality to all people groups. So imitate him. The gospel welcomes outsiders, as we're going to see next week with this man named Cornelius. So will you ask God to help to use you in reaching a Cornelius in your life? Thirdly, Jesus commands us to preach to everyone. So proclaim him. We must preach the gospel because it is the power of God for salvation. Fourthly, Jesus saves irreligious and religious people. So worship him. God in his grace reaches down to convert a vicious man like Saul of Tarsus. He converts immoral people like the Samaritan woman at the well, and religious men like Cornelius who appear to have everything together but don't know the Lord. Regardless of your pre-conversion state, if you are a Christian today, you should stand amazed at his grace to you. Jesus makes all things new. So let's study God's word together.